everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And we are very happy to be here, and a warm welcome from our side, from Women in Geospatial, and from my side. My name is Julia Wagemann, and I'm your host today of this webinar on geospatial careers, lessons from a professional coach. We are very happy to have Thierry Gregorius today with us. He is a consultant and has more than 20 years experience working in the geospatial field. And since last year, he's also a executive certified coach and helping young professionals and professionals in the geospatial field to develop their full potential, to set career goals, to network, and also to foster professional confidence. And today he agreed to join us for a webinar, which is part of the Women in Geospatial webinar series on career development, to share with us his experiences on coaching, and also to give advice and to share, or that you can also see if coaching could be maybe something for you in order to help you to develop yourself and also professionally. And so we're very happy to have you here. Before we start, and before I will hand over to Thierry, I would like to ask you, please feel free to enter into the chat where you come from, so where you are at the moment and where you join us today from, because this is always very nice to see from usually these webinars they attended from all over the world, and it's very nice to see where everyone comes from. So this session is today structured in a way. After the welcome from my side, I will hand over to Thierry, who will give an overview about coaching and give some tips and advice on professional career development. And then it will be around 40 to 45 minutes. And the last 15 minutes of the webinar, we have a Q&A session. And this is really your chance to ask Thierry any questions you have. And for this, we work on the Slido platform. And so I ask you kindly to go on slido.com and enter the hashtag geospatial. And on this, and then once you entered, you can post any question you have. And during the Q&A session, we will then go through the questions we see on the platform. And with this, I would like just to give a short overview on Women in Geospatial Plus, in case you haven't heard about Women in Geospatial Plus before. We are a professional network aiming to promote gender diversity in the geospatial field. The network started in March 2019, and for the past 2 years, we have grown into a global network of more than 2,500 women plus registered, of a global network of more than 2,500 women plus working in the geospatial field. We do different activities, and one part is the webinar series on career development, where we have regular monthly webinars on different topics around career and career development. And so you can go to our website, www.womeningeospatial.com and .org, and you can see more information about upcoming and also past webinars. But we also have a Slack channel and mailing list, and also are active on Twitter and LinkedIn to advocate for diversity and gender equality in the geospatial field. So please follow us, and if you're interested in more webinars, please go to our website and also visit or attend more of our future webinars. And with this, I stop talking, and I would like to welcome to the floor Thierry Gregorius from True Horizon Coaching. And I am very excited to have you here today. And Thierry, welcome, and the floor is yours.
That's great. Thank you, Julia, for the introduction. Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Thierry. I don't know on which part of the screen you can see me, so I'm just going to try and share my screen. And I hope this will work. I don't know if you can see this. Maybe Julia, if you could confirm whether you can see
Yes.
my screen. My screen is actually cluttered with some Zoom elements as well. I don't know if you can see just the slide or also my clutter.
We see only the slide, so
Okay, that's
everything
perfect.
works good.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all. And so as Julia said, we'll have some Q&A at the end as well. So if while I'm presenting, if you'd like to write any questions in the chat or the Q&A, then Julia will keep an eye on those as we go along, and we'll discuss a few of those at the end. I'm gonna try and switch myself off so I'm not staring at myself presenting. So it's always a bit unnerving. But anyway, so glad to be here. And Julia has already introduced me, so there's no point spending much time on this. So as Julia said, I've worked in Geo for about 25 years. In leadership roles in various organizations, more recently also as consultant and executive coach. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. So let's start about talking about careers. So let's start with defining what a career actually is. So according to the Oxford Dictionary, a career is an occupation that you undertake for quite a long period of time. But the key word here is with opportunities for progress. And the key word is really progress, because if you're not progressing in a job, then it's just a job. I would say that that's not a career. So a career clearly has elements of progress in it, and we'll see that throughout this presentation. And careers, of course, have changed, certainly in my lifetime, but also I think the changes have accelerated in recent years. Obviously, there's no longer jobs for life. There's more freedom, but also not as much security. They're kind of the same size of they're kind of the opposite sides of the same coin. And also, I think the majority of people these days work away from where they grew up, which is also a change. So now, what that means is it's all down to you, basically. It's down to you, who you are, what you want, how are you going to progress your career. And obviously, these things may feel a bit scary, and they're actually scary for everyone, because security is a human need. So if we don't have security, it feels a bit scary. That's only normal. But on the flip side, like I said, we have more freedom as well, which is great, which means more opportunities. The thing particularly about geospatial is that you can do anything with geospatial, which complicates career choices as well a bit. So so if you ask us what actually is a geospatial career, there's actually no straightforward answer to that question. I mean, sure, you can be a GIS analyst, or you can be an Earth observation specialist, or whatever, but you can also be an ecologist, a geologist, an archaeologist, a risk analyst, and 100 other things that have geospatial elements in them. So how do you define a geospatial career versus another career? So the way I see this, I group it into three buckets, generally speaking. So in geospatial, you can either take the path of a specialist, so like a GIS analyst or an EO specialist or whatever, or a generalist. For example, if you want to go into leadership or marketing or project management, these kind of things, but still within a geospatial domain. Or you can apply geospatial things in other industries, so that you're working across other sectors, and then you specialize in those industry sectors, whether it be environment or health or construction or utilities, energy. What else I will put on there? Environment, I had that already. Whatever you could, I mean, there's 100 things you can do in various industries. But and if you're if you're kind of a geologist or if you're a utilities engineer who does a lot of geospatial work, your career will probably look completely different to, for example, the geospatial specialist. So it's still it's kind of a choice you need to make, um, and that's at least the way I see it. And a few years ago, I wrote a blog post about this on LinkedIn, which completely blew up. It got the most views of anything I'd ever written. Um, and I'm not going to go through the detail here because you can read that in your own time. But I'll talk there about these choices about specialism versus generalism, or the importance of learning about your end user industries, or the importance of going outside into the field if you get the chance to do that, or traveling, which is something I love doing. It's always good sources for inspiration and experience. And I hope that one day we can do that again. But yeah, so I'll leave you to read that in your own time, because also um, as a coach, most career issues that I come across aren't actually specific to geospatial. The issues, even though I work mostly with geospatial people and geo people, um, the issues we discuss and work on aren't actually necessarily geospatial in nature. And indeed, that seems to be confirmed by, from what I've seen in previous Women in Geospatial webinars. So I've taken some screenshots from the Slido polls from previous webinars. And so I was just interested in that to see who you are and kind of questions you're asking about careers. So in one webinar, the majority of people say employed but looking to progress. So again, progress, the key word for careers. In another one, the top challenge for your career uh, was feeling insecure about your own abilities, and indeed that is quite widespread. Like I said, insecurities is to be human, really. Being seen as the expert can be intimidating. That was the most intimidating thing about careers, which again links back to insecurities, I guess. What has been most helpful to gain confidence? A mentor, which is great. Of course, I would totally support that. Um, and similarly, what would be useful to you to help you further your career? Mentoring and coaching. And obviously, as a coach, I'm happy to hear that. But yeah, I find that quite instructive to see those polls. And so yeah, so in that vein, I'm just going to step through, some of these things as the presentation progresses. And so yeah, I'm going to start with, so how do you work out what you want to do in your career? Which is not as easy a question as it may seem. I see a lot of people who kind of move from one thing to the next, and they stumble from one thing to the next without really asking themselves truly what they want to do. And like Alice in Wonderland said, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there, which is fine if that's the way you want to run your life, your career. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but quite a lot of people, they do reach a stage mid-career, especially, where if they haven't really ever asked themselves clearly what they want to do, where they reach a point where they're feeling a bit stuck, and then they're thinking, so where do I go from here? So the way to think about careers and what's important is really look at universal human needs. So you all know the Maslow hierarchy, I'm sure. Um, so this triangle, and if you look at jobs versus careers, and this is just my interpretation of it, this is not, based on any psychology or anything out of science. So, but a job for me is really just something. A job is just for now that really just provides security, provides an income, but it doesn't really provide the higher level human needs like belonging, esteem, actualizing your true goals, those kind of things, because it's those things that for me are really more a career. So, and if you're asking yourself, am I in a job or am I in a career? Now, this may be a useful thing to look at it. If you come to the conclusion that where you're working now is really just bringing in some income, but it's not really doing much else, then you probably haven't got a career. Well, a more useful thing to look at, universal human needs, is look at the psychology of flourishing. Um, and there's a number of theories around that, but they all converge towards the same few things, um, which I've shown on this slide here. So, starting on the left-hand side, it's a universal human need to use your skill to your full potential. To use them in a way that you feel challenged, that you enter the flow zone, so that you challenge to the point where it feels like a good challenge, so that it's not boring, but also not so challenged that it becomes highly stressful. So it's just the right level of challenge. So in terms of geospatial, those are your geospatial skills basically. And if you can use all your geospatial skills, and that feels good, doesn't it? So um, then all the way on the right hand side, you got a universal need to contribute to a higher purpose. And that's maybe where you apply your geospatial skills to, whether that's environmental or climate change or transport or energy or health or whichever sector it is that you want to apply it to. So that can provide you a higher purpose where you feel that the work that you do really contributes into something bigger than yourself, which is a universally proven human need as well. And no, but that's not enough. It's not enough to just do geo and apply geo. If you just do those things, it provides quite a lot for your career to be happy in your career, but it's probably not enough. And quite a lot of people overlook the things that are in the middle here, those three things in the middle, which are autonomy and control on the one hand, which gives you agency. You feel like you have a level of freedom over the things that you do, and progress, obviously key for careers, as already discussed. You need to have a feeling that you're progressing towards something. Um, and really, really importantly is relationships. And I often find that people overlook that in their job search, or in the way they design their careers, or in the way they plan for their careers. Usually when people plan for careers, it's all about the skills they want to learn, the job titles, or the industries they want to work in. But a key question, and this is really grounded in neuroscience as well, because it's the way our brains are actually wired, is really the relationships you're going to have are also going to determine how happy you're going to feel in your job and your career. So ask yourself the kind of people you want to work with, um, the kind of relationships you want to have. And even if like me, you're an introvert, you might think, well, I don't really need many people. That's maybe true. I quite enjoy working on my own as well, up to a point, but then I also enjoy working with a team, being part of a team and all of that. So it is important for everybody. It is a proven universal human need. Another way to look at this is you probably come across this concept of Ikigai, which is a Japanese concept where you should do what you love, what helps others, and what provides an income. And that's all true as well. It kind of links in with all the things I've listed before this, but with these things, you have to be careful that you don't strive for 100%. That unless it's 100%, you're not going to be happy. It's all a spectrum. Everything is on a scale. Um, you have to realize that you will probably never find a job that is 100%, that is completely exactly 100% what you always hope for, what it would be. Every job has got some elements that aren't perfect. Um, One question is that a number of people know, it's quite common actually, when they ask themselves, what do you actually want? Um, it's not a, there's no easy answer, because I mean, for some people it seems really easy to know what they want to do. For others, it seems a lot harder. If you're struggling with trying to work out what it is that you really want, there's a number of things you can do, and you can read advice on that online as well. So I won't dwell on this here, but you can do things like mood boards, a collage of your interests, achievements, skills, dreams, and stuff, and And if you do that, I mean, I made one myself, which is one in the middle there, things that I've already done, things that I still want to do. Um, and if you look at that, there may be trends appearing in that, and these trends will hold clues as to what are the true drivers, your true innate motivations within you, which will help you frame your true goals as well. Otherwise, you can ask yourself questions. When's the last time I felt really excited and engaged in something? So what was it that I was doing then when I felt like that? Or you could ask other people as well for that kind of advice, which is always useful. Another thing is, so what's another question you can ask is, what's unique to myself? Now, question like, what's your superpower? Or another question would be, if you were an animal, what kind of animal would it be and why? Or if you were a car, what kind of car would it be or why? Or if you were whatever. So these kind of questions that they can be helpful as well. But the key thing is you have to keep it real in the sense that you have to ensure that whatever goals you come up with for yourself are indeed your goals and not somebody else's. And that's not as easy as it sounds, because we're all influenced by people. Um, there's always people we may want to impress, or people we want to belong with, or people whatever. Whatever it might be sure that it is what you want to do and not something that you think other people expect you to do or anything like that. And also realize that your interests may change over time, which is completely normal. It's not like if you've always loved something in childhood that you therefore have to love it all your life, or if you loved something at early career that you always have to stick with that. Your interest can change as time goes on. So as a coach, I work with a lot of people across geospatial at all organizational levels in terms of leadership, or at all stages of their career, whether it's early career or mid-career. And these are kind of the issues that I come across most commonly, whether it's to do with progressing in your role, defining your goals, achieving them, increasing your impact, preparing for job interviews, mid-career transformations, or leadership, embarking on your first leadership position, or growing as a leader, or moving up through the levels, working with people and all the complexities that come with that. And I also work with a lot of entrepreneurs where they deal with a lot of complex priorities because they're responsible for everything. And especially at the moment, it can be quite lonely running your own business. So for them, is a lot of people I work with, they find it useful just to work with a coach, just to have a trusted person to talk to. Excuse me. So yeah, so that's just a roundup, and I'll step through a number of the examples as I go along now. So just recapping, just looking back at this statistic, talking about progress then. And again, there's lots of advice online about this, so I'm not going to dwell on this. But what I observe most often is that people assume that results should speak for themselves, and that's actually not true. If you do good work, that's great, of course, but just because you do good work, that doesn't mean you're going to get promoted automatically. Um, so you need to be explicit about that. You need to talk to people about your goals and what you want to achieve as a next step, and also your results need to be seen from outside your immediate area of responsibility. In a lot of organizations, the way promotions get handled, for example, is that all the heads of departments come together with people they want to promote, and you can never promote everyone you want to promote. So then it becomes a bit of haggling. And who gets promoted? Well, guess who? It often is the people who are known outside their own teams, who are known by other heads of department, or are known by people outside their immediate projects. Um, so just be sure that the impact is seen uh, beyond your immediate area. And as part of that is nurturing your relationships. This links in with other things I'm going to talk about here. Is your relationships are really, really important for all kinds of reasons, but they also help you implicitly and explicitly with progressing in your roles. Um, and of course, you should always look out for opportunities and how you can develop your skills, because it's a really good thing to do. It feels good to learn new skills and apply them. It's kind of obvious, really. Leave your comfort zone. It's always good to scare and surprise yourself a little bit. And surprising yourself happens most often when you prepare to scare yourself as well with something new. Um, I mean, even me here giving this presentation, I've been doing this for 25 years, and yet I always get nervous before presentation. Um, but it's good to scare yourself because it always brings you a step further. You always learn something from it. It's really good to do. Um, Also, don't confuse quality with quantity. Beware of not just working more hours just in the hope of progressing. That's probably going to be counterproductive unless you work in a culture where that's rewarded. Then the choice is yours whether you want to work in that kind of culture. But I would always advise to be smart with your time and reserve your time, apply your time for where it makes most impact. And also, enjoy the now. Really, it's become a cliche these days, of course, but it is very true. And I actually, in my own career, I struggled a bit with that initially. I started my career in a large multinational, where I was surrounded by people who want to be the next CEO, and you got kind of caught up in that. You're always thinking about your next job, and you can easily lose the moment in that, the present moment. There's a really good YouTube video for that I can recommend. It's actually a car advert, but you could totally ignore that. It's a 3-minute YouTube video. I've got the link down there. Um, and it's a car advert where they've weaved into a speech from Alan Watts, who talks about moving through life, moving through your career from primary school to university to your job, getting promotions and so forth and so forth. And all of a sudden you realize something. I don't want to spoil it for you, but when I saw this video a few years ago, like I said, it's only 3 minutes. It blew my mind. It was really, really good. At least it resonated with me. Um, and yeah, so the other thing really is the importance of relationships. And I always like to use the analogy here, the geospatial analogy. Relationships are like triangulation for your career. You can learn a lot from people. You can get you can learn things about yourself through other people, through how they see you. You can get opportunities through other people. So growing your network is always a good thing to do. Again, it's not about the quantity of the network, but it's about the quality of the relationships you've got. And it also links in with this universal human need I discussed earlier. Right, just recapping on another statistic from a previous webinar. So being seen as the expert, which was listed as the most intimidating thing in a previous webinar. So, well, the news I've got for you there is that, well, guess what? Nobody knows everything. even even experts do not know everything. And I think we've well seen that in recent years with various crises where even world-renowned experts have to make it up as they go along. And that's okay. You should never be expected to know everything. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you're expected to know everything, I would argue there's probably something wrong with the situation rather than anything with you or your expertise. Because if anyone asks you for straight out advice, or also as a coach, I try never to give advice. So if ever anyone says which way is the right way, the right answer to that is like Yoda from Star Wars would say, the wrong question that is. Because whether you're an expert, a leader, a mentor, a coach, or anything else, knowing the answers can actually be dangerous. Or, of course, there are situations where the answer is clear cut, and that's fine. But if you're dealing with complex issues, particularly, it's much better to lead with questions and to frame problems. And as you keep questioning the problem, trying to understand the problem, the solution will normally reveal itself. It will become so obvious in the end that you didn't even have to come up with it yourself. So the skill is not necessarily in having the expertise to answer every question that you're being thrown at. The skill is to ask good questions about the problem you're staring at, really. So and that's the way I work as a coach as well. Um, Next statistic: feeling insecure about own abilities. Well, there's actually a very good webinar on this, on imposter syndrome, which came out a couple of months ago, I think. So, which is very good. You know, it's got a lot of useful information in it. So I just recommend you watch that. I'm not going to recap in detail on this here. So, imposter syndrome is generally a feeling of insecurity where you feel like a fraud, and it can show itself in a number of ways. Um, all I would say as a coach is just be careful that you don't jump to conclusions. For example, saying I'm a woman, therefore I probably have imposter syndrome. When you read these statistics, for example, that women have imposter syndrome more often than men, I'm slightly skeptical about that. I've worked with a lot of men with imposter syndrome as well. And imposter syndrome isn't a real disorder anyway. It's just a range of feelings. It's not really um, it's not really a treatable or diagnosable condition as such. But those feelings that you feel and that are labeled as imposter syndrome, they can also be generated by other things. For example, if you're being excluded by a group, um, that can generate kind of the same kind of feelings. And then if you jump to conclusions and saying, oh, well, I've got imposter syndrome, so that implicitly would mean I need to work on my imposter syndrome, then you're actually skirting around the real issue, which is that you're being excluded from a group, which wouldn't be helpful in that situation, for example. So that's all I'll say. Yes, there's a lot of good information out there, but be aware of your own specific circumstances. That's all I would say here. In terms of developing confidence, again, there's a lot of advice out there that you can read up on from really good sources like Harvard Business Review and all these things. Um, what I would say as a coach always is really challenge your assumptions and look at the evidence. As a coach, I ask a lot of questions of people just to drill down into the evidence, which always reveals more stuff than anybody's ever realized. So you usually have more strengths than you realize because the strengths, your own personal strengths, will probably come easy to you, and because they come easy to you, you don't regard them as a strength. Um, but that's wrong, because just because it comes easy to you doesn't mean it will come easy to somebody else. Um, Also, our brains are wired to prioritize the bad stuff over the good stuff. That's just the way we've evolved to make sure we don't get eaten by scary lions. So we're always scanning the horizon for potential threats, and that's why our brains prioritize these things over good stuff. So like for example, like with feedback, if you get 20 pieces of really good feedback but one piece of criticism, which piece are you going to remember most? Which piece are you going to dwell on most? Well, the criticism, of course, because that's the brain, that's the way the brain is literally wired. So it takes extra effort to get over that, to give um, due regard to the 20 pieces of good feedback you got, because they should definitely outweigh the criticism. If you get criticism, you can always learn from it. That's great. It's always useful for learning, but you need to stay in the right proportion. And then there's things like you can do, accept what you can't control. Learning to let go is a huge skill, also in leadership. Um, and if you master that skill, you will master quite a lot of things, I think, also in terms of stress and well-being. And you can draw strength and inspiration from things you love doing. And again, the importance of relationships is really key again. So the main thing really is switch off your autopilot and challenge your assumptions. Challenge your habits and thought patterns, because it's quite easy to slip into these habits where you don't even see the reality anymore for what it is. Um, I mean, there's an example here. I mean, as a young boy, I always dreamed of flying jets like these, and for various reasons, it didn't work out. I'm too tall. The country I grew up in didn't have an air force, so whatever. So it was never going to happen. Um, but you should never stop dreaming or stop envisioning, you know, your true goals. Because imagine who in your mind is flying this jet in your who's in the cockpit. Do you think? And me as a boy, I would obviously imagine the man in the cockpit. But probably even as a woman, if you look at this picture and imagine the person in the cockpit, you probably imagine the man as well, just because that's the way we've been brought up. That's the way we've been influenced, through all these implicit biases that we're subjected to. And yeah, even though in this case, the jet is being flown by a woman. Um, So just question your own biases as well, because we all carry biases. It's part of being human, and it's part of our upbringing. It's part of hundreds of years or more than that of evolution. How our cultures have evolved, how we're still influenced by our cultures. So you need to be really careful with that. I mean, we've come a long way even in my lifetime. I mean, when I went to primary school, I still remembered in art class, we got split into boys and girls. Us boys, we went to do woodwork with hammers and saws, and the girls were taken off to do embroidery and knitting. I mean, that's just outrageous. When you think about it now, it's completely outrageous. But still, this will have left an impression on you subconsciously, whether you agree with it or not. And therefore, it's always important to challenge our own assumptions, because these assumptions, they can really play tricks on all of us, all the time. So it's really the key thing to remember, and this is shown by neuroscience as well, and um, we don't really see the way we don't really see the world the way it is. We see the world the way we are in our heads. And as a coach, I work with people on that all the time, challenging assumption, questioning assumptions, looking for evidence. And that's also how you can overcome insecurities, because when you really start looking at the evidence of your achievements and your strengths and the things you've really done, you will start to realize, well, actually, yeah, I've done quite a lot. And here's another example, of how you shouldn't be put off by imagery. I saw this advert in the FT the other day. Slightly disappointing, but the FT is normally quite good about these things. But I looked at this advert and said, oh, I'm obviously not quite old and grey enough to do this diploma then. And obviously that's absolutely not true. I mean, there's no reason why anybody couldn't apply for this diploma, whether you're male and white and old, or whether you're female and young, or whatever. Anybody should be able to apply for this, but it's because they've chosen to put that image with it. Your brain will immediately declare this to be unsuitable for yourself. And I caught myself thinking the same when I saw the advert, but so that's why I thought it was a good example. So we need to challenge these things. Um, right, and then moving on in terms of progress, looking for jobs, preparing for interviews. I'm going to step up a bit so I can go through all the slides in time. Um, Working with people who look for new jobs, or looking for their next step career-wise, or preparing for interviews. What comes out a lot is there's often a lack of clarity. So, for example, if you find yourself drafting and redrafting your CV over and over, that's probably a sign that you're not quite clear enough about the kind of job that you want, and also the kind of strengths that you bring to the table. And the two need to work together, of course. So it's really, really important that you're clear in what you want, and clear of the kind of job that you like. What would that job actually look like? Um, um, And only then, once you clear, then make the next step of applying for jobs, because it makes it a lot easier then to know which jobs to apply for, and it makes it a lot easier then to prepare yourself and present yourself to the potential employer if you're clear about these things. And also, don't chase job titles. Job titles are in fact meaningless. Um, if you go for job titles, it's a bit like going to the restaurant, and instead of eating the food, you eat the card on which the menu is printed. And that sounds ridiculous, of course, but that's what we do with jobs all the time. We see a job title and we think, oh, that sounds great. Especially with the job title inflation that you have these days. In the past, everybody, when it's in my lifetime, it's kind of inflated. The job titles everybody's achieved, something now. That's the latest, and then who wonders? Um, I'm not sure what the next thing is going to be, but or even if you're not interested in kind of leadership positions, if you see an interesting job title, just stop yourself right there and saying, okay, that's a nice job title, but so what does this job actually entail on a day-to-day basis? Because at the end of the day, a job and a career is made up of how you spend your days and how you spend your weeks. So ask yourself, what does a really good day look like for you? What does a really rewarding week look like for you? When you pour yourself a drink on a Friday night and you think back, yeah, this was a great week. So it's what has happened in that week. What kind of things did you do? Which kind of people did you work with? These are the important things about a job. It's not about the title. And also remember, job adverts are in fact adverts. So you need to read them with a pinch of salt. You read a lot of these statistics as well. For example, women only apply for a job if they're 100% qualified, whereas men apply if they, I don't know what the percentage was. It's actually proven to be wrong anyway. But just be clear though, that recruitment is a process. It's a negotiation. It's a performance. It's an interview where they're interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them. And if you look at a job advert, and I have to laugh sometime when I see job adverts like quite junior positions where they want the world and all the rest of it, 10 years experience, and they want you to, I don't know what, do a handstand while juggling 12 balls or whatever. I mean, you just have to laugh at the number of job adverts I see sometimes. So rather than say, oh my God, I need to fulfill all these criteria, and that's an extreme example, of course, but just remember, while you look at the criteria that they list, these criteria that people list, even if it's a reasonable job advert, those criteria are an ideal case scenario. And so you don't have to fulfill all the criteria. If you're interested in job, if that job speaks to you, the description speaks to you, not the title, forget the title. But if the job description really speaks to you, then it's worth applying anyway, because you haven't got anything to lose. If you get an interview, that's your chance to have a conversation, to find out more about the job and for them to find out more about you. And I mean, I've recruited a lot of people in my lifetime as well. And if a person comes along that isn't quite right for this job, but um, but you like the person as an employee, if the employer likes you as a person, they will think in the back of my mind, well, maybe there's another job for this person. Or maybe we can tweak the job to make it work for the person. Or no, it is a negotiation. There's always room for maneuver, and you need to remember that, because job adverts are just adverts. No, they just present themselves in the best light, or sometimes in the worst light. Because when you see a job description like I've written down there in jest as a joke, um, then I think it says more about the employer than it says about you. To me, that says the employer don't actually understand geospatial, or they don't understand their requirements. The other thing to remember is you can't A/B test your life. So you can't live one life and then say, oh, well, I didn't quite like this, so I'm going to try another life. So when you do commit to something, you do need to commit fully. I don't know if you've read these books, The Midnight Library or The Alchemist. I read those. They're great books. I don't want to spoil it for you, but the storyline basically is, the storylines go in the vein of whichever life you choose, you can always make the most of it wherever you are, or you might travel all around the world looking for something and then only return home and realize it was right under your feet. That kind of thing, the kind of cliche, but it's true though. Um, so you can usually make a lot of where you are right now. So as a coach, I often challenge people about their current jobs if they say they want to move on to a new job. I first always want to explore the current job and see, isn't there something they could do there to progress, whether it's progressing in the role or progressing in terms of projects they do or the skills they can learn and apply or the people they work with. And only if you've exhausted all of those options, then look at, okay, let's look at the next step then. It's always worth doing. And also with mid-career transformations where you've already done 10, 12, 15, 20 years and you want to change in your career. In some cases, you may want or need something radical, but in a lot of cases, a small change can make a huge difference as well. So you shouldn't discount that. Right. Other stuff about progress. Developing as a leader. So either if you want to step into your first leadership role, or if you're already a leader and moving on to more senior leadership roles, again, there's lots of advice out there, so I won't dwell on this. But um, the main thing for me that I would say is just be yourself. And it's a bit of a cliche, but it is true. Do not try and emulate anybody else. I mean, sure, if you admire people if you admire other leaders, sure, you you can use that for your inspiration. But be yourself, be authentic. Don't try to be somebody else. I see that still a lot that people trying to be, somebody else's leader, which then makes them insecure because you feel like you're acting, you're not really being yourself. You're putting on this performance, and that then causes a lot of stress. And as soon as you realize, well, actually, it's okay to be me and to be a leader, then you can relax a bit, and then you achieve a lot better results as well. And that's kind of linked to also not needing to be the expert all the time. As a leader, you don't need to have all the answers. No, so lead with questions, keep learning, involve your team, develop and trust your team. It's a bit like working in the garden. Um, you just need to create a space for the plants to grow, and then you need to get out of the way and just leave them to do their own growing. Um, and it's the same with people and as a leader. So the challenge there is to know when to let go and to know when to be hands-on as a leader. And that's, for me, that's one of the hardest thing to learn, which you can only learn through experience, really. And a job title, again, doesn't create a leader. There's still people who rely on their job title for authority, but you don't gain authority through your status or job title. You gain authority through your actions and behaviors, unless you work in a very hierarchical organization where it really is all about the layers of job titles and whatever. And then the question is that a hierarchy or is that a culture you like working in? You may, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that's a question for you then. And you can be a leader without managing a team. Quite a lot of people are obsessed with this notion that, I want to be a leader and therefore I need to have a really big team to lead. Well, no, you can be a leader without having any team at all. For example, you can be a leader working across an organization, um, where you need to bring things together from different departments and making sure that it's happening. Like a program manager. A program manager may have no people reporting to this post, but will be leading massive projects or programs of projects. Um, so yeah, and also in leadership, actually, as you step through leadership levels, you need to learn, but you also need to unlearn, and that's counterintuitive, but it's critical to realize that, because when you work as a specialist and then you step up into your first team leader role, I mean, there's kind of obvious. Obviously, the way you work as a specialist is not going to be the way you can run a team, because you can't run your team the way you run a geospatial workflow. That just doesn't work. But also more critically, when you step up from an operational leadership role, like a team leader, to a more executive leadership role or more strategic leadership role, um, there you have to actually unlearn the things that made you a good operational team leader. Because as an operational team leader, like I had a department, um, the work you do is still within relatively well-defined parameters, which are given to you from above, from the executive leadership. Um, Whereas at the executive leadership, it's all about strategy, vision, advocacy, decision making, and doing that within highly uncertain environment with incomplete information, with a lot of ambiguity, a lot of risk. Um, there are no recipes for doing this right, really. Every situation is different. Every situation is highly complex. You cannot predict the market. You cannot predict majority of things, and still you need to make decisions that are going to impact your customers, your shareholders, your stakeholders, your staff. It's a completely different way of working. You have to be really comfortable with uncertainty at that level, which is not at all the same as leading operationally. So yeah, but it's a really good journey to step through, and if that's the kind of thing you're interested in. Or if you're an entrepreneur or freelancer, that can be quite tough because then you're in fact all of these things in one person. And as I said, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and the main challenge they have is priority setting, because you can easily feel overwhelmed when you're responsible for everything. So that's key to build your support network, your relationships. It's also important to keep developing, to have a kind of career plan, even if it's quite loose, that you keep on learning, but you keep on learning anyway because you're running your own business. But it's important to look after yourself as well in that position. And like I say, a lot of these people, they like working with a coach like myself because it can be quite a lonely place as well if you're running your own business. And remember, you're never completely ready. I mean, I would say if you feel 100% ready for a job, you're probably overqualified actually, and it won't be enough stretch for you. You will probably get quite bored quite quickly if you're completely ready for the next job. Right. So just to wrap up quickly, just a couple of slides of what is coaching, and I'll mention this because I know Women in Geospatial, you have a kind of mentorship coaching program as well. I mean, the slides will be shared after the presentation anyway, so I won't dwell on this now. But so in terms of coaching versus mentoring, the way I see it, although it's changing and it's not as clear cut as it used to be. For me, coaching is about asking questions, like I said, whereas mentoring, at least old school mentoring, is more about giving advice. But these days, good mentoring, if you go in a course, um, how to be helpful to somebody, how to mentor somebody, you will probably be taught to work more like a coach, like working with questions rather than answers, like I said. So coaching indeed is helping people help themselves, really. So it's not training, it's not showing you how to do it, it's not consulting, it's not helping you do the actual thing, and it's not counseling either, it's not resolving your personal issues. Although as a coach, I do coach the whole person, so it can also skirt into these personal issues as well, but I have clear ethical boundaries there. I'm aware of the things to do there, but I'm not qualified to give advice on those things. But also equally, I'm not there to train you. I'm not there to consult. I'm not there to give you the solution. Um, and the reason why coaching is framed like that, through questioning and empowering people and helping people about themselves, is because it's been proven that it is really, really effective. Because when you help somebody come up with their own solution, they are more likely to implement that solution, and they're more likely to succeed at this. And this has been proven in a number of studies, for example, where they compare training with coaching and training, and the productivity increased dramatically when it was um, merged with coaching as well. Ditto with return on investment studies, although I'm slightly skeptical of those because you can't really quantify it that well. But But just to say, the return on investment is a lot higher if you take an approach as a coach with questioning than just advice giving. So how do you coach? So you ask open, non-leading questions. You just listen. You just be with a person. Try not to give advice unless clearly useful, and instead use your knowledge to ask good questions. So you shouldn't ever say, "If I were you, I would do this." That's actually really bad advice. Even if it's true advice, I would I would advise you not to do that, even though there's contradiction in terms. But yeah, so be neutral and impartial, and just remember that anything you say should be better than saying nothing, and that is a key challenge. As a coach, when I was trained to become a coach, that was one of the hardest things, to not interject and to not talk. You really, that's the acronym WAIT. Why am I talking? Just wait. Just wait. Ask yourself, why am I talking? If you are talking. Uh, and indeed, there are circumstances where a lamppost can actually be a good coach, because a lamppost won't talk back at you, which means you can articulate openly what's in your head without interruption. And that in itself can be really helpful sometimes. So the skill is in knowing when to let people just articulate what's in their heads, and when to ask useful questions, or when maybe even to interject with a little bit of advice when it's useful. And lastly, you need to coach the whole person. Certainly that's what I do. Um, Similar to what I said about job titles, I don't look at the label. I don't look at the fact whether you're male or female or black or white or whatever. I'm not really interested in that as a coach. I look at the uniqueness of the person that's in front of me, because every person is unique. Every person's circumstances are unique. And therefore, as a coach, I ask questions also to explore everything from different viewpoints, looking for evidence, not jumping to conclusions, being aware of unconscious bias and stereotyping, which could interfere with conclusions. Um, and also, I would say, yeah, be slightly wary of articles you read. I mean, they can be really helpful. I'm a huge fan of Harvard Business Review, for example. Um, but be careful when you read stuff like I mentioned earlier, that, oh yeah, as a woman, you're probably more likely to suffer from imposter syndrome. Well, like that article from HBR said, actually, that may not actually be true. And if you tell somebody, oh yeah, it's probably imposter syndrome, when it isn't, you could actually do more damage than not. So you need to be slightly careful with these conclusions. So then lastly, so what advice did I give my own kids? What career advice did I give them? And in fact, I didn't give them any advice. Practicing what I preach, I just asked them questions. So the first question I asked them is, so what is it that you like doing? And the answer was, well, I love the ocean. I'd love to do something with the ocean. As you can see, they're well into the ocean, because we're lucky enough to live near the sea. And so then my next question was, so what does that look like? And for Jack, he said, well, oceanography. And Esme said, marine biology. And I said, well, great. Hope so. Good luck. I know it's going to work out somehow, because it's driven by their intrinsic motivation. It's driven by what they love doing, which is being in the sea. And so, yeah, I try not to give advice if I can help it, even with my own kids, which is really, really hard. But yeah, there you go. So, and also in terms of for your own geospatial careers, um, think back about those true universal needs. Do try and think, what is that you love doing? What is it where you want to make an impact on the world? And then use that to drive which way you want to go in geospatial. So, and this is kind of the recap on all of that. So be clear about what success means for you. Make sure that your career satisfies universal human needs. Doing geo alone is not enough. You need to make a difference. You need to work with people you like working with, and all these other things. Challenge your assumptions. Lead and mentor with questions. Keep learning. And enjoy the now. Enjoy what you do now. Otherwise, there's no point in having a career if you don't enjoy it. And to enjoy it, you need to enjoy it now, not in the future. So yeah, in the slides, I've got some further resources for you to look at. Like I said, HBR is very good. They got quite a lot of good free stuff you can listen to, audio content. The FT's got a good thing on imposter syndrome. More podcasts. There's loads of geospatial podcasts. I've listed 2 here where I've recently spoke on geospatial careers as well, geomob and mapscaping. I also like them because they often interview people who then share their story about how they've developed their geospatial careers, which is always interesting to hear. And I'm thinking maybe there's an opportunity for a female hosted podcast as well, maybe Women in Geospatial, maybe that be a market for that, because most podcasts seem to be hosted by men, I think. The other thing is Women in GIS is a really good collection of use cases. In fact, I remember working as a consultant a few years ago. One of my clients asked me to put together a listing of use cases for GIS, and I looked around, I couldn't find anything until I stumbled on Women in GIS, and incidentally, it had the best collection of use cases for GIS that I've ever come across, irrespective of the fact that it's purely about women, but that was coincidence really. But it also serves as a really good use case library. So there's 2 reasons to look at that. Then there's other resources on my website as well. So anyway, sorry, I've run slightly over. And I can hear some children in the background, which is always nice. So yeah, Julia, do you want to take back over and see if we have any questions?
Yes. So first of all, thank you so much, Thierry. It was a wonderful hour. Yeah, I don't know. I made so many notes. It was a mix of inspiration, advice, motivation, reflection. We also got book recommendations and some gardening tips. Before we go to the Q&A, I realized we had quite a few people just joining us now at, in my time, 6 p.m. Central European summertime. And I would like to apologize to you because we got we got into the daylight saving issue. And so when we organized the meeting, we gave the wrong time indication, Greenwich Mean Time, which we realized yesterday. And so basically we changed the timing to the correct timing, which was 4 p.m. British Summer Time. And so for all those who already just entered the webinar now towards the end, don't worry, we have a recording of the session. We will make it available on our Women in Geospatial Plus YouTube platform in the next days. And then you have a chance to re-watch and re-listen Thierry's advice about geospatial careers. And I can really recommend it. I apologize again, and but still you just entered for the Q&A, and this might be helpful for you to get some inspiration to rewatch the video later. And please go on our Twitter and also on our website and LinkedIn, where we will reshare the link to the YouTube recording once it is available. And with this, I will now start the Q&A. I will share my screen. And we have already quite a few questions on Slido. And I start with the first one here, which is, what suggestions would you give for changing careers from an academic to NGO?
Yeah, it's like I say, as Yoda would say, maybe the wrong question to ask that is. So as a coach, I would ask, what is driving you to move to the NGO? Presumably, maybe you have an NGO sector in mind, what that is. And maybe for the sake of argument, let's assume it's environmental, just so I can talk about it. So if it is environmental, so what is it that you love about that? And therefore, looking at that, so if that's your goal, you want to make a difference in the environmental sector, in the NGO sector, then work your way backwards from there. So here's my goal. So and then look at your academic career path so far and see which achievements, which skills, which projects will be useful as transferable skills and experience for that journey to make that step into the NGO sector. And you will probably find you'll probably find some overlaps there. You may also find some underlaps there, maybe some things you need to learn about that sector, or maybe some experience you need to get, which you could maybe get through volunteering then on the side while you're still in academia, and then gradually build it up that way. Or you may find you have enough to make that step, depending on the exact NGO, and then do it that way.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The next question we have is, how do you stay focused on living in the now, especially if you're an early career professional and you're pressured to get tasks done?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I do know, and I remember it from my own days as an early career professional, because obviously you want to make an impact where you are. You want to be seen to be doing good work. You may not always be in the driving seat in terms of setting work priorities. Those priorities may be given to you by your boss. But within all of that, you probably still have the freedom to structure your day the way you want, to work the way you want within the constraints of having to go to certain meetings and whatever. But between those meetings, you can structure your own day. You have your own routines that you can develop. You can choose the people you surround yourself with at work. So depending, what you mean by living in the now, because that question is kind of slightly different for everybody. But for sake of argument, let's say what really motivates you is having chats with people. If you're that kind of person, then you could engineer your day around having water cooler moments at the office once we can go back to the office, or if we're still in the Zoom world, you could arrange for chats whenever you can squeeze them in with people. If you like working with people, you could do Zoom sessions where you do your work, they do their work, as if you were together in an office, but you're doing it from home, so you can still share the odd joke or whatever it is. Or if you're still working from home, you can probably structure your day. So enjoying the now, like for me, and I do miss working in the office, even though I've worked from home for years. I mean, not just for the pandemic, but I've been working from home for the last 8 years now or so. But I always love going out for a walk in the woods or just around the block, or I just love being out in nature. So every spare minute I have, I spend it in nature, basically. So that's irrespective of the job. You can also enjoy the now, or enjoy the now more, if you make sure that that the time you spend outside of your work is spent well, the way that you want to spend it. And if you find you can't do that, then maybe it's time to look at the reasons why you can't do it, because maybe there's something you can change there, probably. But yeah, but not knowing what they are, I can't really give any further advice. As a coach, I would drill down into that, and then we could work on that. But yeah, that's all I can say for now.
Okay, then we go to the next question. What are your thoughts on frequent job changes every 3 to 5 years? Geospatial tech is such a fast moving field. I think I need to do this to stay relevant.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, 3 to 5 years is quite normal, I think. That's not that frequent. If you say changing jobs every year, that I'd be a bit more concerned about that. Well, yeah, every 3 to 5 years is quite reasonable. Because, I mean, I would say, once your learning curve goes flat and you really exhausted all the learning in your job, then it's probably time to start looking for your next step. But remember that this next step or this next job could be within your existing organization, of course. So it doesn't necessarily mean leaving your organization where you are now. It could be just progressing or stepping into another role, or just getting more responsibility or doing something else. So I think the key for me would be if your learning curve is still steep, then stay a bit unless there's other reasons why you might want to leave. But 3 to 5 years is quite reasonable, I think.
Okay. Then the next question is, what is the best way of reaching out to people and creating networks if a person is introverted, like you mentioned?
Yeah, introverted like myself. Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, the scariest thing is when you're at a conference with hundreds of people in the hall, and then you have to walk up to people and you look at people's name tags, and you, you try to find something to say. uh, so that doesn't work very well. And also, I actually think studies have shown that it doesn't work very well. So it's good to be intentional. It's good to find a reason why you might want to talk to somebody. Um, and online, that's easier than ever these days. So if you're interested in a particular area, in a subject or topic, look up people on LinkedIn who are active in that field, and just drop them a line, see if they're interested in having a chat. And then if they are, and you may well be surprised how many people are open to have chats. Schedule a Zoom call, and if it's one-to-one and it's already pre-arranged, then it's already a lot less scary anyway. So that's quite a good way of doing it. In Yeah, and in the real world, it's always good to go into industry events. For an introvert, that's always a bit scarier when you're on the exhibition floor, on the conference floor, walking up to people. But the way to do it there is maybe to start with people that you know, and then once you stand there chatting with people you know, open the circle out to people you don't know, include them in your circle, or join another circle where there is a person that you know, and join them that way and see where it leads. So there's all kind of things you can do.
Okay, I think there are many options now. And then we go to the next question. How does your coaching framework intersect with systems of bias and discrimination? For example, sexism, racism, homophobia.
Yeah, I mean, as a coach, when I qualified as a coach, I learned a fair bit about psychology and neuroscience. I had quite a bit of freedom to look at specific areas of interest for myself, which is why I chose neuroscience as well. That was something that particularly interested me. Um, but it's a continuous learning curve, and there's a lot. I mean, I can't say that I'm an expert in these things of discrimination and bias, but as a coach, I'm trained to ask questions in a in an impartial way, in a neutral way, in a non-judgmental way. That's why I said I just look at the whole person. And if you take that approach, it's more unlikely anyway to be prey to unconscious bias and all of that. Having said that, now if people come to me, and I've worked with a couple of women recently who said to me they felt they were being held back by a glass ceiling. And of course, I can't say whether that's true or not because I don't work in that organization. I don't know how they work really. I can only go by what I'm hearing from them. But then I drill down into questions and see, look for evidence of of the things that they say. So and I ask them questions like, so it's what would other people say about this, and which actions did you take, um, stuff like that, and just drilling down into it. And um, in one case, the conclusion was it probably wasn't the glass ceiling, it was probably more the fact that she wasn't explicit enough about her desires and goals. Because as soon as she said to her boss, "Well, actually, I want to be promoted," her boss was like, "Oh, great! I thought you were happy in your job. That's why she never got promoted until then." But as soon as she explicitly put the desire to be promoted on there, she got put on the path to promotion. So in that case, it wasn't the glass ceiling, it was more of an explicit thing. Whereas in the other case, I think it turned out indeed to be glass ceiling because they had a change of leadership. The leadership changed from predominantly female to predominantly male, particularly alpha male. And when I started drilling down as what was happening in the organization, what kind of things were happening, what kind of projects were being prioritized, which kind of people were being prioritized. Yeah, it sounded like a glass ceiling, but as a coach, I can never say for sure. I can only say, well, look, we've drilled down into this. You've given these answers. What do you think is happening here? Um, and I would never decide for a person, well, your problem is clearly this, your problem is that. No, people need to come to their own conclusions, which is true not just for kind of solutions and stuff, but also for stuff like this. I would never say to somebody, well, I think you've got imposter syndrome, or I think you're being discriminated against, or it's not my place to say that.
Thank you. Then the next question, what advice would you give to a recent geospatial graduate who wants to pursue a career in the geospatial sector?
So you graduated in geospatial, but haven't got a job yet, I take it, I guess this question is. Yeah, again, I would link it back to those universal human needs I talked about, from the psychology of flourishing. So the key thing there is, because you have all these choices, you can be a specialist, you can be a generalist, you can go into all kinds of different industries. I would first ask myself, so what is the greater cause, the higher purpose that I'm really passionate about? Could be environment, could be transport, could be energy, could be whatever, and then work your way backwards from there, and then say, well, let's say it's energy. No, the energy transition is happening now. Um, so what excites me about that? So where would I want to be in that? So does that mean I should be a geospatial specialist, or should that mean I should be an energy specialist with geospatial skills? So because those two paths could be very different. So I would work my way back from there from what you really want to do. So where do you want your geospatial contribution to make a really big impact, and work your way back from that one. So what does that mean for my next step? At least that is the approach I would take as a coach, if I were to work with somebody like that.
Okay, I think this is a great advice when you just start out in your geospatial career. And then the last question, at least on Slido, as an entrepreneur, freelancer, if you don't want to employ staff, do you have thoughts on different models of development and growth?
Okay. I'm not sure if this is development and growth for you personally, or for your business, but I can take both, I guess. Um, yeah, if you don't want to employ anybody, obviously you can work with contractors or associates, and then other freelancers collaborate on that basis. Um, So you can grow your business that way, or you can grow your business through a platform model or whatever it might be. I mean, there's lots of advice out there for how you could do that. If it is in terms of you personally in your career, um, yeah, I mean, if you don't want to employ staff but you want to grow as a business, you're going to have a lot of work to do if it's just you, which then doesn't leave a lot of work for your own personal development, apart from the fact that you're going to be learning on the job every day. But if you want to do more structural career development, um, I'm finding that as a coach as well, because I only coach 2 days a week, 1 or 2 days a week, and I have another job, indeed in geospatial, in energy transition, for 3 or 4 days a week. It doesn't leave a lot of time for personal development. So the way to carve that time out is stick it in the diary as if it was a work commitment. Um, and that could be short bursts of development, like watching a webinar for an hour, but stick it in your diary and stick to it as if it was a client meeting, because you wouldn't move a client meeting, so why should you move a personal development meeting with yourself? Schedule a meeting with yourself to do it. Or if it's a longer training course or qualification, then schedule it in as a holiday kind of thing, or like a short sabbatical for a week, or yeah, or worst case, do it over weekends and evenings. But you've got to be careful with that, because you need to have downtime as well, especially as an entrepreneur. because otherwise you're going to be heading for burnout. So yeah, but there's a few things you can do.
Okay, so I think we are now done with the questions, and I think we also had a very fruitful, very interesting and inspiring session. Thank you again, Thierry, for sharing your advice and tips with us today. I would like to apologize again for those who joined later due to the daylight time issue we had. But as I said before, the session is recorded. We will make it available on YouTube. And then if you have any more questions, also feel free to reach out to Thierry. And yes, and then I would like to say goodbye with a very being inspired and motivated, and I hope that you feel the same, and I wish you all the best for your career advancement and career and personal growth. And yeah, have a good evening, a good day, or a good morning, and thank you for joining today. Goodbye.
Thanks very much. Bye everyone.